The war tent stood at the center of the alien camp. Its walls were tall and dark, made of heavy fabric stretched tight over bone poles. Inside, the air was thick with smoke in the fire pit. Shadows danced across the ceiling like restless spirits. Around the center table, 6 alien generals sat in silence. They were soldiers of a proud and ancient race. Their armor was dull from years of battle, their claws sharp, and their eyes narrow with suspicion. They had fought many enemies before, beasts, machines, rival clans, but never had they faced humans. This war was unlike any they had known, and tonight they waited for the leader of those strange, dangerous beings. The table between them glowed with a map made of light. Red marks showed their own armies. Blue marks showed the human fleets that had spread across the stars like fire. Each day the blue marks grew closer. Each day more ground was lost. Their hearts burned with anger, yet fear also crept inside them. One general, broad and scarred, tapped his claws against the table. "He will come," he said, his voice low. The human admiral agreed to meet here. A ceasefire was promised. Another snorted. Promises mean little. It could be a trick. He might come with soldiers. He might kill us all. The others shifted uneasily. It was true. Humans were known for bold moves, for strikes that broke rules of war. Some called them clever. Others called them reckless. None could deny they were dangerous. Minutes dragged by. The fire crackled. Outside, the night wind moaned across the plains. The generals kept their eyes fixed on the tent flap, waiting for the shadow that would step through. The scarred general leaned forward. "When he comes, we must not show fear. We must demand answers. Why do humans fight with such fury? Why do they take worlds not their own? We must see what kind of leader commands them." But even as he spoke, his hands trembled. None of them would admit it. Yet the thought of meeting the human admiral filled them with unease. They had heard the stories of ships that fought even when burning, of soldiers who refused to retreat even when surrounded, of enemies who fought with a strange fire in their hearts. At last the sound came, the soft crunch of boots outside the tent. The flaps stirred. The generals rose to their feet, armor creaking, claws ready to strike if needed. The tent flap opened. The human admiral stepped inside. He was tall, but not massive like some of their kind. His body was lean, his face lined with age and war. His eyes were steady, calm, but carried the weight of many battles. He wore no helmet, only a simple dark coat. Across his chest hung medals, symbols of victory. But what caught their eyes was not the man himself. It was what he carried. In his arms, wrapped in cloth, was a small bundle. The generals leaned forward, unsure. The firelight flickered across the cloth. Something inside shifted and gave a faint sound, soft, almost like a cry. The scarred general's jaw tightened. His claws scraped against the table. Was it a weapon? A trap? No, it was too small, too fragile. The human moved forward slowly. He did not sit at the table. He did not speak. Instead, he lowered his head and adjusted the cloth in his arms. The generals stared, their minds racing. What could be so important that the leader of their enemy carried it into the heart of their camp? The human raised one hand, and from his cloak he pulled out a small container. He tilted it carefully, and a thin tube met the lips of what lay in the bundle. A quiet sucking sound filled the tent. The aliens froze. Their eyes widened. Inside the human's arms were 2 of their cubs, small, weak, still too young to walk. Their fur was soft, their eyes closed tight, and the human was feeding them as if they were his own. Not a word was spoken. The tent fell into perfect silence. Even the fire seemed to hold its breath. The generals could not move. Their claws hung in the air. Their throats were dry. Never in their lives had they seen such a thing. An enemy leader bottle-feeding their young. The scarred general whispered, his voice shaking with rage and confusion. "What is this?" The human admiral did not answer. He only kept his eyes on the cubs, rocking them gently, as if the war outside did not exist. The sight burned itself into the minds of the alien generals. A predator cradling prey. A warrior showing tenderness. A sworn enemy protecting their future. The war tent, once filled with fear of battle plans, now held something stranger. Not death, not blood, something else. Something none of them understood. And as they stared, stunned into silence, a new thought crept into their minds. Perhaps humans were not what they seemed. The tent was silent, yet the silence was not the silence of calm. It was heavy, pressing on the air like the pause before thunder. The alien general stood frozen, their yellow eyes locked on the bundle in the human admiral's arms. 2 cubs. Their cubs. The little ones were helpless, soft, their fur still pale with youth. They should have been in a nursery, safe and guarded by their own kind. Instead, here they were, lying against the chest of their enemy, feeding from a strange human tool, unaware of the danger around them. The generals could not believe their own eyes. The scarred general, the oldest of them, leaned forward, his jaw trembling with anger. "How?" he whispered. "How did he get them?" None answered. None could. The human admiral did not speak. He held the cubs close, moving the bottle from one small mouth to the other with careful, practiced hands. He seemed untouched by the sharp stares surrounding him. His face remained calm, his breathing steady, as if the weight of the war outside could not reach him. The general's claws itched for blood. This was not right. This was not natural. Their enemies should not hold their young. Their enemies should not even understand how to feed them. Yet here he stood, rocking them gently, humming a tune in a voice low and soft. The youngest general, tall and thin, slammed his fist against the table. The glowing war map flickered. "This is mockery," he growled. "He insults us. He holds them to show our weakness. He means to shame us in our own tent." The others nodded at first, eager for anger to cover their confusion. Yet as they looked again, their fury faltered. There was no grin on the human's face, no cruel smirk, no taunt. His lips were pressed in a thin, tired line, and his eyes were focused only on the cubs. The fire crackled. The cubs made soft sounds, little whimpers between gulps. The human adjusted the cloth around them, keeping them warm, his large hands impossibly gentle. The scarred general spoke again, louder this time. "Explain this, human. Where did you find them? Why bring them here?" Still, the admiral did not answer. He seemed deaf to the words of his enemies, his world reduced to the small lives in his arms. The youngest general could bear no more. He reached for his blade. The sound of steel leaving its sheath rang through the tent. "Enough games," he shouted. "Give them to me or I will—" He stopped. The admiral had finally raised his eyes. They were not cold. They were not cruel. They were steady, calm, but there was something behind them, a warning, a fire that spoke louder than words. The young general froze, his weapon half drawn, his throat dry. He felt as though he had looked into the gaze of a mountain, silent, immovable, unshakable. Slowly, the admiral lowered his eyes again and returned to the cubs. The young general's hand shook. He slid the blade back into its sheath, unable to speak. The other generals exchanged uneasy glances. Something about this human unsettled them more than his fleets or his weapons ever could. At last, one of them found his voice. A female general, her scales bright with rank, leaned forward. Her tone was softer, though still sharp with suspicion. "These cubs, they belong to one of our villages. Were they taken when your soldiers struck? Were they prizes of war?" The admiral's lips moved, and at last he spoke. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. No, just one word, yet it carried the weight of truth. The generals stiffened. They had expected lies, boasts, threats. Not this. The Admiral shifted the bottle to the second cub, letting it drink. "We found them," he said at last. "Alone, crying. No one came for them." His voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. "So I carried them." The words cut deep. The generals looked at one another, uneasy. If his words were true, then the cubs had been left behind in the chaos of battle, left to die, forgotten by their own kind. Shame prickled their skin. But still, suspicion burned. The scarred general snarled. "Even if this is true, why bring them here? Why not return them with warriors at your back? Why not use them as shields, as leverage for demands?" The Admiral looked at him, eyes calm. "Because they are not soldiers," he said. "They are children." The tent fell silent again. The generals stared, not knowing how to answer. In their culture, mercy was weakness. To spare an enemy was to dishonor your own. Children were precious, yes, but only to their clan. The enemy's young were nothing but another line to erase from history. Yet here was a human who saw it differently. The female general's voice trembled. "You feed them? You, who have slain our warriors, who burn our skies, who cut our fleets in half, yet you feed our cubs like they are your own." The Admiral's eyes softened. Someone must. The words struck harder than any blade. The youngest general slammed the table again, though his strike was weaker now. "This is a trick. It must be. Humans kill without fear. They fight without rest. They cannot do this." His voice cracked, betraying doubt. The scarred general leaned closer to the cubs. His eyes narrowed as he watched their tiny bodies rise and fall, safe in the arms of their enemy. He felt his chest tighten. His mind fought against it, but his heart whispered another truth. The human was not mocking them. He was protecting them. The cubs finished drinking. One yawned, a tiny squeak breaking the air. The Admiral tucked them close, wrapping them in his cloak. They curled against his chest, safe, warm, unaware of the storm of emotions around them. The generals could only stare. One by one, their anger faltered. Their claws lowered. The war map still glowed, but no one looked at it. Their thoughts were far from battle lines now. For the first time since the war began, they felt something strange toward their human enemy. Not just fear, not just hate, something else, something they could not name. The Admiral did not push it further. He did not speak more words. He simply stood there, silent, holding life in his arms instead of death. And in that silence, the generals began to see him differently. Perhaps the humans were not only predators. Perhaps they were something far more dangerous. For a predator kills, but one who protects, one who fights with both blade and heart. Such an enemy could not be broken so easily. The fire crackled again, louder this time, as if reminding them all that time was passing. The night outside stretched on, yet inside the tent, the war itself seemed to pause. No orders were spoken. No threats were made. Only the image remained. A human admiral cradling alien cubs in a war tent. And that image would not leave their minds, no matter how hard they tried. The cubs slept soundly, curled against a human admiral's chest. Their tiny breaths rose and fell in rhythm, soft sounds that should belong to a nursery, not a war tent. The alien generals stood around him, their claws twitching, their tails stiff with unease. None spoke at first. The sight was too strange, too wrong. Their minds fought to understand what their eyes refused to deny. At last, the youngest general broke the silence. His voice was sharp, but it cracked under strain. "This cannot be trusted. No warrior would show kindness to an enemy. Not in truth. He hides something from us. The others shifted, some nodding quickly, grateful for anger to shield them from their own confusion. Yes, another hissed, her scales bristling. It is a weapon of the mind. He seeks to break our will. Look at him, so calm, so still. He thinks this show will weaken us. The scarred general frowned, but his eyes stayed locked on the human. His battle-hardened mind told him to agree, to see a trick. Yet his heart whispered another thought, one he did not want to hear. The human admiral did not move except to hold the cubs closer. He said nothing. He seemed blind to their suspicion, deaf to their whispers. The firelight painted shadows across his tired face. His eyes, though half-lit with exhaustion, never lost their quiet focus. The female general slammed her claw against the table. The glowing map trembled. "Speak, human," she demanded. "Why do you hold them? Why do you come into our war tent with our blood in your arms? Tell us your game, or face our blades." At her words, the youngest general reached again for his weapon. This time the others did not stop him. Their fury, mixed with fear, pushed them forward. The human admiral finally stirred. He lifted his head and met their eyes one by one. His voice, when it came, was low, firm, and steady. "There is no game." The generals froze. "I found them," he continued, his words slow, heavy with weight. "Alone, crying in the ruins. Soldiers brought them to me. I did what I could." "Lies!" The youngest general spat. "If you truly cared, you would have returned them sooner. You bring them here not as mercy, but as bait." The admiral's eyes narrowed, though his tone stayed calm. "Bait? For what?" "To see if you still have hearts." The words cut deep. The youngest general growled, his claws scraping sparks from the table's edge. "You dare insult us?" "Truth insults only those who fear it," the admiral replied. The generals stiffened. They were used to roaring commanders, to enemies who spat curses and threats. They were not prepared for a human who spoke with such quiet certainty, a man who needed no raised voice to sound unbreakable. The scarred general spoke at last. His voice was low, almost cautious. "Why feed them yourself? You have attendants, soldiers, servants. Why lower yourself to care for enemy young with your own hands?" The admiral's gaze softened as he looked down at the cubs. He shifted the cloak, keeping them warm. "Because they needed it," he said simply, "and because no one else was there." The words were plain, yet they carried more power than any grand speech. The tent grew heavy again, filled with silence that pressed against every chest. The generals did not understand this human. They could not, in their way of war. To show care for the enemy was weakness, a shame worse than defeat. Yet here stood their greatest foe, cradling what should have been discarded. The female general's voice dropped, unsure now. "Do you expect us to thank you?" The admiral's head shook slowly. "No, thanks mean nothing. Only life matters." The fire popped. One of the cubs shifted and let out a tiny sigh before falling still again. The sound stabbed through the general's anger like a blade of ice. The youngest general hissed, clinging to fury like a drowning man clings to a rope. "Do not let him twist your minds. He is clever. He knows mercy will confuse us. He feeds the cubs not for them, but for us. He seeks to make us doubt." The scarred general turned his gaze toward him. "And do you not doubt already?" The young one faltered, his words caught in his throat. The scarred general's eyes returned to the human. He had fought 100 battles. He had seen enemies burn, friends fall, worlds turn to ash. He knew cruelty when he saw it, and what he saw now was not cruelty. It was something else, something he had no name for. Suspicion still burned, yes, but it fought against another feeling, respect. The admiral raised his eyes again, scanning their faces. "You believe mercy is weakness," he said. that sparing the enemy makes you soft. But tell me, if strength comes only from killing, then what do you protect? What do you fight for? The generals bristled, anger flashing again, but none answered. His words struck too close to the truth they never spoke aloud. He continued, voice quiet but relentless. Your armies fight for victory. Mine fight for more. They fight so that cubs like these can live. Even yours. The words dropped like stones into water, sending ripples through every heart in the tent. The youngest general bared his teeth. Lies. If you cared for life, you would end this war. The admiral's gaze sharpened. If you cared for life, you would never have started it. The words rang like a blade striking stone. The generals recoiled as if struck. Shock twisted inside them, deeper than any wound. The human did not speak like a predator playing with prey. He spoke like one who believed his own words, one who carried them as a banner in his soul. The scarred general lowered his head, his chest heavy. His people had started this war to claim new worlds, to expand, to conquer. The humans had fought back, harder than anyone expected. And now here stood their leader, holding the future of their kind as gently as his own. Suspicion still coiled in the tent like smoke. Yet alongside it grew something new, something that made the generals shift uneasily. Doubt, not doubt in the human, but doubt in themselves. The cubs stirred again, their tiny bodies pressing closer against the human's chest. The admiral rocked them slightly, humming a quiet tune. The generals could not tear their eyes away. Their minds screamed that this was wrong, impossible, dangerous. Yet their hearts whispered a different truth. Perhaps this was not a trick. Perhaps the human truly meant what he showed. And if that was true, then everything they believed about humans, about war, about strength, was under question. Shock and suspicion battled inside them, neither winning, both spreading like fire. The scarred general clenched his claws. For the first time in his long life, he did not know what to say. The human admiral did not press further. He only stood, silent, cradling life in a tent built for death. And in that silence, the alien generals felt the ground shift beneath them. The war tent felt colder now, though the fire still burned. The alien generals stood around the human admiral, each caught in their own storm of thoughts. The cubs slept soundly, unaware of the weight of 1,000 eyes on them. The silence stretched too long, and silence in a war tent was dangerous. It was a scarred general who finally broke it. His voice was low, but every syllable carried the weight of command. Human, he said, we have listened, we have watched, but now we ask directly why. The admiral looked up. His tired eyes swept across their faces. I told you already, he said softly, because they are children. The words, so simple, stirred anger in the generals. The youngest general slammed his claws onto the glowing map. That is not enough. You think us fools? We are warriors. We know strategy, we know games. There must be a reason beyond that, a demand, a price. But the admiral shook his head. Not everything has a price. The female general hissed. Then it is weakness, and weakness cannot be honored. The scarred general's eyes narrowed. He had fought beside these commanders for decades. He knew their thoughts, their instincts, but something gnawed at him now, something he could not dismiss. Is it weakness, he asked quietly, to protect what cannot protect itself? The others turned toward him in surprise. His words sounded strange in his own ears, as though another had spoken them, yet he did not take them back. The youngest general snarled. Yes, mercy is weakness. To spare the enemy is to spit on your own dead. The admiral's gaze snapped toward him. Then your dead fought for nothing. The young one froze. His throat tightened, but rage surged to cover his doubt. You dare insult our fallen? The Admiral stepped closer, still holding the cubs. His voice sharpened, though it never rose above steady calm. I honor all who fight, even yours. But if you kill the young, if you kill what is helpless, then you kill not for honor but for pride, and pride dies with the body. The female general's claws dug into the table. And what of you, human? Do you not burn our cities? Do you not strike our fleets without pity? Where is your honor then? The Admiral met her glare. I fight soldiers. I fight armies. I fight those who choose the blade. I do not fight children. The words struck hard. The generals shifted, restless. Their culture had no such line. To them, war was total. If a village fell, all fell with it. Young, old, it made no difference. To spare one was to risk revenge later. That was the law of survival. Yet here was a man who defied that law with unshaken calm. The scarred general leaned forward, his voice low. You say this is honor. But what is honor to humans? Is it victory? Is it mercy? Or is it only another word to hide weakness? The Admiral looked down at the cubs, then back at the alien leaders. Honor is not words, he said. Honor is what you do when no one watches. Honor is a line you refuse to cross, even when it costs you. The youngest general spat. Pretty words. But in war, word or ash. Only power decides truth. The Admiral did not flinch. Then why are you here? Why meet in this tent, under a ceasefire, if power alone decides truth? The question cut like a blade. None answered. The cubs stirred again, one letting out a small cry. The Admiral rocked him gently, his large hand steady. The generals watched, their fury clashing with something deeper, something they could not name. The female general's voice softened, almost against her will. You risked your life to bring them here. If one of us chose to strike, you would fall. Why do this yourself? Why not send messenger? The Admiral's reply was simple. Because honor is mine, not theirs. I will not give to another what I must carry. The scarred general's chest tightened. He saw no weakness in the human's face, only resolve like stone carved by fire. The youngest general could not endure it. He drew his blade in a flash, pointing it toward the Admiral. Enough! He shames us with every word. He dares to act greater than our law. He must die here now. The tent filled with tension. The generals stiffened, waiting. Would blood spill across the map? The Admiral did not retreat. He shifted the cubs higher in his arms, his chest exposed, his eyes fixed on the young general. Strike, then, he said calmly, but you strike me first, and then you strike them. The words froze the air. The young general's hand shook. The cubs whimpered softly, as if sensing the danger. Their tiny cries echoed in the tent louder than any roar. The scarred general stepped forward. His voice thundered like steel. Put down your blade. The young one trembled, rage battling with shame. His eyes darted from the cubs to the Admiral, then to his fellow commanders. At last, with a snarl, he shoved the blade back into its sheath and turned away. The tension broke, but the air stayed heavy. The Admiral stood firm. This is my line, he said. I will not kill children. I will not allow them to be killed while I stand. That is human honor. You may call it weakness. You may call it madness. But know this, armies that fight with no honor cannot endure. They rot from within. The scarred general's claws dug into his palms. His people had spoken of honor for centuries. They had sung of it, carved it into stone, written it into law. Yet now, in this tent, he saw something he had never seen before, a different kind of honor, one that did not feast on blood, but guarded life. The female general looked down at the map. The red marks of their armies glowed, surrounding blue marks of human fleets. For the first time, the lines blurred in her eyes. Perhaps, she said quietly. Our way of war is not the only way. The word shocked the tent. The youngest general whipped around, fury blazing. You betray us. But the scarred general lifted a hand, silencing him. His gaze stayed fixed on the admiral. You carry our cubs, he said slowly. You feed them, protect them. You speak of honor as if it were more than victory. The admiral nodded once. The scarred general's jaw tightened. Then answer me this human. If we strike again, if we burn your worlds, if we take your young, will you still speak of honor? The admiral's eyes burned like coals. Yes, he said without hesitation. Even then, the words rang through the tent like thunder. The generals did not speak again for a long time. The fire crackled, the cubs sighed, and outside the wind howled across the plains. At last, the scarred general sat down heavily. His claws tapped against the table, but his voice was quiet, thoughtful. Perhaps, he said, we have much to learn about humans. The others said nothing, but doubt spread across their faces. Their law of war, their pride, their honor, all seemed smaller now. And though no peace was declared, the question of honor had cracked their certainty. The admiral held the cubs close. He did not smile. He did not gloat. He simply stood, steady and silent, a man who carried not just war, but something stronger. The war tent felt tighter now, as though the walls had drawn closer. The cubs rested in the admiral's arms, their small bodies warm against his chest, but the air around him was ice. 6 alien generals stood in a circle, their eyes locked on him, claws twitching with unease. The scarred general sat heavy in his chair, silent, his thoughts hidden. The female general stood near the map, her tail coiled tight. The youngest general, still shaking from his failed strike, paced like a beast in a cage. The admiral said nothing. He held the cubs close, steady as stone, his presence filling the tent more than any speech could. At last, the youngest general broke the silence. His voice shook with anger. We are fools to listen. Every word he speaks drips with poison. He seeks to break us, not with blades, but with tricks. He turned to the others, desperate for support. Do you not see? He wants us divided. He wants us doubting our own law. This is war, not a nursery. The female general's eyes narrowed. And yet, you could not strike him, even with blade in hand. The youngest froze, rage flashing across his face. Because he used the cubs as shield. No, the scarred general said quietly, his deep voice cutting through the tension. Because you saw what we all see. He would have let you kill him, but not them. That is not shield. That is defiance. The words hit the tent like stone. The youngest general bared his teeth, but had no reply. The admiral finally spoke, his tone calm but iron-hard. If you wish to kill them, you must kill me first. That choice is yours. But I warn you, if you strike, then this war will not end with soldiers. It will end with extinction. Not because of me, but because you have killed the last piece of honor left in this galaxy. The generals bristled. Some hissed in anger. Others shifted in unease. The fire crackled louder, throwing jagged shadows across their faces. The female general leaned forward, her voice sharp. You speak as though your way is the only way. Our law has carried us for centuries. Mercy weakens. Fear controls. Victory comes only when nothing remains to rise against you. The admiral's eyes met hers. And yet here I stand. Your law has not broken me. Your fear has not bent me. And your victory has not come. The words silenced her. For a long moment, only the sound of the cub's soft breathing filled the tent. The youngest general slammed his claws against the map. Enough. He is no more than flesh. He bleeds like us. Why do we tremble at his words? He spun toward the admiral, eyes blazing. Put them down. Give us the cubs, and we shall see how strong your honor is when your arms are empty." The admiral did not move. He held the cubs tighter, but his stance did not shift. His voice dropped, steady as stone. "I will not." The youngest general roared, his fury boiling over. He lunged forward, claws outstretched. But the scarred general moved faster. He slammed his arm across the young one's chest, stopping him mid-stride. Their eyes locked, sparks of fury crackling between them. "Stand down," the scarred general growled, "or I will cut you myself." The youngest snarled, but he did not move. His claws twitched, his breath came fast, yet he stepped back. The tent shook with the weight of the moment. The admiral did not flinch. He had not moved at all, save to rock the cubs gently when they stirred at the sound of raised voices. The scarred general turned back toward him. His eyes were hard, but something new glimmered beneath the steel. Respect, or perhaps recognition. "You risk your life for what is not yours," he said. "And yet you stand without fear. Why?" The admiral's answer was simple. "Because life is worth more than war." The generals fell silent. They did not agree, but they could not deny the power in his words. The female general's tail loosened. Her gaze shifted from the admiral to the cubs, then back again. "Perhaps," she murmured, "this is why humans are feared, not because of their weapons, not because of their armies, but because they do not yield even to hate." The scarred general nodded slowly. The youngest hissed, but he did not speak again. His rage had met a wall he could not break. The admiral said no more. He stood in silence, his will filling the space. The battle of blades had not begun, but the battle of wills had already ended, and the generals knew they had not won. The war tent no longer felt like a place of command. It felt like a cage. The generals stood in silence, their thoughts heavy, their hearts unsettled. The human admiral remained at the center, calm as stone, the cub still safe in his arms. No one dared speak at first. The fire burned low, casting long shadows that stretched across the floor like dark claws. Outside, the night wind whistled, but inside, the only sound was the steady breath of the sleeping young. The scarred general finally broke the silence. His deep voice rumbled like thunder. "If we kill him, we prove nothing. If we let him leave, we show weakness." His eyes narrowed at the admiral. "But if we keep him, if we hold him prisoner, then perhaps we learn the truth of his kind." The admiral met his gaze without fear. "You will learn nothing if you treat me as a cage treats a bird. I came because I was asked. I brought no blade. I offered a truce. What you do next will show what kind of leaders you are." The words cut sharper than any blade. The generals shifted uneasily. Some hissed under their breath. Others looked away. The female general's voice was softer, but her eyes burned with doubt. "And what do you gain by carrying our young? Why feed them? Why risk your life for them? They are not yours. They are not even your kind." The admiral looked down at the small faces nestled against him. One cub stirred, gave a tiny cry, and pressed closer to his chest. He answered in a quiet voice, "Because they are alive. That is enough." The generals stared at him, their minds twisting. To them, life had always been a tool, a thing used and discarded for war. But to see an enemy hold their young as if they were precious, it tore at the very roots of their belief. The youngest general spat, his anger still raw. "Do not listen. He seeks to turn our hearts soft. This is how humans conquer, not only with ships, but with lies, with pity, with poison in the soul." But his words no longer struck as hard. The others did not roar in agreement. Instead, they stood quiet, eyes flicking from him to the admiral, then back again. Doubt had taken root. The scarred general turned sharply. "Enough." His voice silenced the young one. "Your anger blinds you. The enemy has shown a choice we have never faced. That cannot be ignored. He looked back at the Admiral. You risk much by walking here. You risk more by defying us. Why? Tell me plainly, what do humans want? The Admiral's eyes grew hard. We want what you have forgotten. A future, not for one race alone, but for all who will live in it. If you choose war, then we fight. If you choose peace, then we build. But know this, humans do not fight to rule. We fight so children like these can grow. The generals felt the words like a storm pressing down on their chests. None spoke, but none could look away. The female general finally stepped forward. Her tail moved slow, her voice low. If what you say is true, then this war is already lost. Not on the field, but here. The scarred general's jaw tightened. He did not argue. He only nodded once, slow and heavy. The youngest general roared, striking the table with his claws. Traitors, you would bow to him? You would let a human shame us. His eyes burned with fury, but even he could see it. The change in the air, the old certainty was gone. The Admiral spoke again, quiet but firm. This is not about bowing. It is about standing. You stand taller when you protect the weak than when you crush them. That is what makes a warrior. The tent fell silent. No one moved. The crack had formed. The wall of old law, once solid as stone, now had its first fracture. The fire gave a last sharp pop. One of the cubs yawned in the Admiral's arms. In that tiny sound, in that small, helpless breath, the future of the war shifted. The generals felt it. They did not admit it, but they knew. Something had changed. The first crack had been struck, and cracks, once made, only spread. The war tent felt like the heart of a storm. Outside, soldiers waited in silence, unaware of the battle unfolding inside. Inside, the general stood trapped between two worlds, the old law of fear and the strange new truth carried in the arms of their enemy. The human admiral remained steady, holding the cubs close. He had not raised his voice, not drawn a blade. Yet every word he spoke cut deeper than steel. The scarred general's gaze was locked on him. His massive hands rested on the table, claws tapping, but his mind was far away. He saw the cubs, helpless and small. He saw the admiral, fearless and calm. And he saw himself, a soldier who had killed countless young in the name of strength. For the first time, his chest felt heavy. The youngest general could no longer contain his rage. He slammed a fist against the floor, snarling, "You are all blind. Do you not see? He twists you with soft words. He makes you weak." He pointed at the admiral. "Take the cubs. Kill him. End this trick." The female general's eyes flashed. "And then what? We kill the one who risked his life to feed our young? We slaughter the symbol of what we fear most? That would not be victory. That would be shame." The youngest spat, his voice breaking. "Our law demands it." The scarred general turned on him, his voice like thunder. "Then perhaps our law is broken." The word struck harder than any blade. The tent fell silent, as if even the fire held its breath. The general stared at him, shocked. Never before had the scarred general spoken against the old law. The youngest reeled back. "You dare betray our fathers?" "I dare to see," the scarred general growled. "Our fathers taught us that mercy is weakness, that fear controls, that only by crushing every rival can we survive. And yet," he looked toward the admiral, "this human shows us another way. He holds no fear. He gives no cruelty. And still, he stands stronger than any of us." The female general stepped beside him, her voice firm. "The law made us soldiers, but it also made us blind. If we kill every future, then what do we protect? If war is endless, then what do we win?" The youngest general bared his teeth, but his defiance faltered. The others, silent until now, shifted uneasily. They had been raised to believe the law was iron. Yet now, iron cracked before their eyes. The Admiral finally spoke. His voice was quiet, but every word struck clear. Your law has carried you through centuries of war. But wars do not last forever. If they do, then there is nothing left but ashes. Humans learned this long ago. We fight, yes, fiercely, but not to destroy. We fight so that one day our children will not have to. The generals looked at the cubs. Their tiny breasts filled the silence like a song too soft to ignore. Something stirred in them, something old but long buried. The memory of why life had once been precious, before the law twisted it. The scarred general turned back to the Admiral. His voice was rough, but steady. You have broken something here tonight. The law will never be the same. Our soldiers outside wait for orders. If we command them to fight, they will fight. But if we command them to stop, he paused, his claws curling tight, they will stop. The youngest general hissed, tore between fury and doubt. But even he saw it now. The tide had shifted. The old law no longer held the same weight. The female general looked at the others. We cannot erase what has been done. Blood has been spilled. But we can choose what happens next. The scarred general gave a single nod. Then we choose. One by one, the generals lowered their heads in agreement. Even the youngest, though his face twisted with anger, said nothing more. The Admiral watched in silence. He had not begged. He had not threatened. He had only stood firm, holding life in his arms. And now, the war itself had changed. At last, the scarred general straightened. He spoke not just to the humans' leader, but to his own kind as well. The old law is broken. Tonight, a new law begins. No longer will we strike the helpless. No longer will we burn every seed of tomorrow. We will fight when we must, but we will not kill the future to win the present. The words echoed like thunder through the tent. The first crack had widened. Now, the wall of old law lay shattered. The Admiral gave a slow nod. He said nothing more. He did not need to. The cubs stirred again, their small cries soft but clear. The sound filled the tent, and for the first time, it was not the roar of war that bound the generals together. It was the fragile breath of life. Outside, the soldiers still waited, their weapons ready. But when the general stepped out, their orders would not be for battle. The war had turned, not with fire, not with steel, but with the simple act of human feeding the young of his enemy. The shattering of old laws had begun.